So Australia win the third test against India. Probably a result that not many people saw coming whatsoever. Um, yeah, Australia won by 9 wickets in indoor on a very spicy wicket that we'll talk about more in a sec. But overall, a great win for Australia. Second win in India for us since 2004, since the famous team that Gilchrist led won the series over here. Just the second win, and both have come under Steve Smith, which is another interesting fact. But overall, Australia completely outplayed India in this test, and there are a range of factors that I think this test match was a lot more competitive than the other two, and we'll get to that. But an unbelievable performance by Australia, and they just kept really composed the whole match, so fair play to them, to be honest. So the teams, both teams made changes. Australia brought in Green and Stark, who both returned from injury. Green was apparently fully fit, while Mitchell Stark was playing through pain with his finger, apparently. But yeah, those two came in, and honestly, I feel like this test match, Australia had the best team on paper that they've had all series. Not playing Warner and Renshaw, who both struggled very much in the first two tests, definitely bolstered the batting order a lot more. And honestly, Stark versus Cummins in these conditions, you'll probably take Stark just for the reverse swing factor, and he does have a bit more pace than Cummins. As for India, India swapped Rahul for Gill. I think that's the right decision. KL, he's such a great player when he's on, but he's really been struggling in the first two tests. And then the other change that India made was Umesh Yadav came in for Shami, which, was fair enough, I guess. Umesh Yadav's a great bowler, and he showed that in this match. He had a really good test match. So India won the toss and elected to have a bat, and I feel like very quickly that decision looked really, really good for India. And of course they were going to bat first, but you win the toss on a pitch like that, and you could see in the first 6 overs how ridiculous the deck was looking. And honestly, we'll get more into that after I do the match review, I guess, and we'll actually talk about the pitch. But it does a real disservice for India to create pitches like this, because it just, if anything, it just makes the gap between the two teams' skill even less prevalent, because it just brought Australia's spinners back into the game. But yeah, India in the first innings were pretty all over the place, actually. They played some really bizarre shots. Like Rohit Sharma was coming down trying to whack Kuhneman over his head in his first over. And yeah, there was other shots. Like Shreyas Iyer got out to a really bizarre cut shot on a wicket that, was playing really low. So overall, India really struggled in that first innings. But a lot of that, obviously Australia bowled quite well, but a lot of it as well was India just playing really crappy shots that weren't really there to be played. They just didn't seem to be having a great deal of respect for the Australian bowlers in the first innings. Matty Kuhneman got 5 wickets. He bowled extraordinarily well. He is one of the better spinners Australia has in the country, and it was a bit of a surprise that he wasn't picked in the first place, and they went with Agar ahead of him. But yeah, he bowled extraordinarily well. He was getting good turn off the wicket, and yeah, he looked really good. And a lot of that has to do with the pitch, of course, but honestly, I think he out-bowled the other two left-arm spinners in this match, in Jadeja and Axar. I thought he utilised the conditions better, and he bowled with way more consistency than the other two. And India, in the end, were bowled out for 109, and I feel like when India got bowled out for 109, everyone kind of knew that what kind of test match this was going to be. It was going to be it wasn't going to be going the 5 days, that's for sure. And with the Australian spinners getting as much spin as they did, I feel like a lot of Australians were looking at India's 109 and going, that is a really good score on this pitch. I personally was watching going, this wicket is par, 80 runs in the first innings, and India got 109, and that would have been plenty. But yeah, Australia made it look a bit easier than India in the end. Khawaja and Marnus in particular went out there, and they were looking both really comfortable in the conditions. In particular, Usman Khawaja, Uzi didn't really listen. You can tell that Uzi's a very strong character and that he doesn't listen to the criticism as much, because he played his natural game. He played confidently. I think he said post-match that he didn't really change anything from the second test, which he batted really well in that match as well. And yeah, he did play less sweep shots, and there was all this talk about the sweep shots, but he put it away. He played his natural game, and he scored essentially 100. Scored essentially 100, given the conditions of that pitch. No one besides Khawaja really got going for Australia. Smith departed pretty cheaply. Green looked really good for a little period there until he got an interesting decision by the umpire, Joel Wilson. And Peter Handscomb. Peter Handscomb's such a great batter, and I just wish he backed himself a bit more in these conditions. Obviously, he batted, like, Matthew Hayden came out and said that he was batting in an un-Australian fashion, whatever that means. I thought Handscomb was looking pretty good out there, besides the fact he probably did need to look for a few more runs, but by occupying the crease, he kept the innings going longer, and Australia in the end had a first innings lead that was pretty handy, so I don't think he'll be losing too much sleep about how he batted, Peter Handscomb. Then Umesh Yadav came on and cleaned up the tail. He was bowling some incredible deliveries. The one that got the ball that got Stark and then the ball that got Murphy out was like poetry in motion. It was really, really good bowling. And yeah, he's just Mr. Reliable for India. It seems whenever he comes in, he's not like one of the standout performers, but whenever he does play, he always performs, and he always helps India in certain situations, particularly when bowling to the tail. He's always been pretty good at bowling to the tail. Overall, I will say that India's spinners were kind of poor, not just in the first innings, but in both innings of the match. Like, they just looked a bit docile, honestly. They were bowling really bad lengths, and kind of a point I wanted to bring up was that of Axar Patel. Now, overall, you'd say Axar Patel has had a really good series, particularly with the bat. With the bat, he's been a real thorn in Australia's side, and honestly, he'd probably bat top six in any other team in the world. It's just that India have so many classy all-rounders. But Axar, yeah, he's been batting really well. But if you actually look at his bowling figures, they're not great. He's only got the one wicket for the series at an average of 104 or something. So Axar hasn't quite been the shining light that Ashwin and Jadeja have been for India, which is really interesting because when England toured last year, or the year before, sorry, he was all over them, but Australia have found a way to manage him in comparison to the other two spinners, so that is interesting. So India commenced their second innings, and they really, really needed the bat strongly to be in this game. I felt like anything above a 100-run lead going into the last innings for Australia to chase would have been really competitive for India. But again, Australia's bowlers stood up, and in particular Nathan Lyon, he took the real lead in this match and bowled extraordinarily well, especially in that third innings. Pujara looked really good. Pujara was managing the conditions beautifully. He was batting in such a mature, smart way and was playing some really good shots until his dismissal thanks to a really, really good Smith catch. Like, that was a really key point in the match. Furthermore, I thought Stark looked really dangerous whenever he came on the bowl, and he just offered something different that India haven't really seen for this match. I reckon low-key one of the most important parts of this match was when India led by about 20-odd, 5 wickets down, and Stark bowled that ball to Iyer, and Usman Khawaja took an unbelievable catch at mid-wicket. That was such a key point in the match for me, and from there, India's innings kind of petered out. So in the end, Lyon cleaned up the tail, and Australia needed 74 or 75 to win, which going into the third day, I think a lot of people thought that was going to be really tough. And yeah, I was just really concerned. I didn't think we'd be able to find 70 runs given how that pitch had played for the first few days. And then second ball of the day, it was Khawaja nicks off, and then you go, wow, this is going to be a really, really tough effort. But then Marnus and Head just batted beautifully to get the job done, particularly Travis Head. He came out, played aggressively. I wish he would just come out and play like that every time when he's opening the batting in these conditions. That's what we've really needed. Particularly the first innings of this match, I was pretty disappointed with Travis Head and the fact that he didn't really take it on as much as he probably should have, but he did it in the second innings, and I really hope he learns from that and just decides to play that way. Because when he does play that way, whether he's batting in the middle order or at the top of the order, he's borderline unstoppable. But yeah, if anything, he's putting the selectors to shame for not picking him in the first test, that's for sure. overall, Australia handled the conditions better than India. I think they batted far more intelligently than India. India, like I said before, I just felt like they were underestimating Australia, and they probably lacked the respect to them. I feel like they maybe thought Australia was a bit more broken than what they were, with Pat Cummins and David Warner both flying home, Agar heading home, and maybe they thought Australia would just be pushovers in this test match, and Australia really took it to India, and they said there's still 2 games to go in this series, so really well done to them. Overall, the pitch, like the first 2 pitches in this match have been controversial. The first one in particular, very controversial. But when you look at this, those wickets both at least had something there for the batsmen, and Rohit Sharma made some good runs. Khawaja made good runs in the second match. A lot of batsmen looked good on the wickets. But then this test, it's like, I don't know if it was because the pitch was a last-minute pitch, because originally this test was going to be in Dharmasaya, or however you pronounce it. I can't really pronounce that city very well. Maybe that's a part of the reason why the pitch played how it did, but it was unacceptable, and it's such a shame because we had a total of about 8 days of cricket so far this series, which is pretty disappointing. 8 or 9 days, which, we're going into the last test and we've only seen that much cricket. It's a bit disappointing, to be honest. With that being said, it's been a thoroughly entertaining series. It's just a shame that we haven't been able to see as much cricket as we would have wanted. With the win, Australia book a place in the World Test Championship final, and I'm pretty sure India are going to be the other team playing Australia, unless Sri Lanka can win 2-0 against New Zealand, and then if Australia win the 4th test, whatever it is. But yeah, just going into the last test, if Australia can win that and go 2-2 with India, you'd almost call this series a success for Australia. 2-2 against India at home, that doesn't happen very often, and it's just, that would be probably a good result, as funny as that sounds, for Australia in the end. So yeah, we're going to Ahmedabad for the next test. The Indian, who was it, Rohit Sharma, came out in the press before this test match and said, if we win this match, we might prepare a green seamer in Ahmedabad. I'm not sure that's going to be happening anymore. I feel like it could be quite similar to the pitches from the first 2 tests or the 3rd test, to be honest. I don't think we'll be seeing a green seamer out there now, because overall, if 2-2 is a success for Australia, then I feel like 2-2 is a big failure for India. To go 2-2 after the position they've had in this series would be really disappointing for them. Australia will probably be unchanged going into the last test. I don't think there's too many injury concerns or anything for the team, from what I've been reading. I feel like India is going to be unchanged, but I have to say, it's very interesting to say this, because he's a great of Indian cricket and a legend, and there's no way India will drop him, but it just feels like there's some eyes starting to turn on players like Virat Kohli, who he has still not got a century for a few years now, and he's an absolute legend of the game, and it would not surprise me one bit if he just came out and scored 100 off 70 balls in the next match. But he has been struggling, and a part of that is that the pitches have been so hard to bat on. But yeah, he's under a bit of pressure, and I as a cricket fan, I hope that he comes out and makes a big score in this test match or in some tests later this year. But yeah, overall, series has been fantastic so far. It's 2-1 going to Ahmedabad, and this last test, if this series has been anything to go by, this last test will be over fairly quickly, but it'll sure to be entertaining.